Okay, here's a review of the Zither Zuck, or Chuck, sorry, sold by the Arc Euro Trade Limited in England, I believe. And I bought one 80mm chuck and discovered that it has some flaws in manufacturing, and this video is to demonstrate what it should be and what it should not be. This chuck here is a MCO chuck. You can see it's an MCO, and what I want to show is that how a chuck should operate, and it means that these jaws should be free to move. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can move this about 0.3 of a millimeter or so back and forth. It doesn't rock in any direction. It only moves in, radially. And to operate the chuck with a key, it's very free moving chuck. No force needed to move the jaws. So let's put this away. Here is the chuck from Zither. There's an inspection report saying basically it passed all the specifications. Really nice. Here's the chuck. Zither is the manufacturer in India. First impression was that, okay, it's a chuck. Basic Chinese Indian quality. And I didn't notice anything different from the chucks that I've seen on Sieg machines that are made in China. And I already disassembled this to speed up things. There's now the back plate missing, or the back cover actually. We don't need that. There's also two of these gear wheels that turn the scroll. We don't need those. And yeah, this is the fixed version. Here you can see the free movement. It's a bit large, I would say 0.5 millimeter or so, but they move. Now that I have fixed them, I can show that the chuck operates quite nicely. Whoops, wrong direction. Quite nicely with just one finger. Smooth movement. The jaws themselves, they don't move sideways. There's no sideways play, and no movement, no rocking movement at all. Only the radial play, which comes from the jaw teeth and the scroll having a clearance, which is normal. So the problem I noticed with this chuck can just get it undone. Ah, sweet. Un moment. Okay, there we go. For the record, I'm using copper to hit anything because it's basically soft. It doesn't hurt anything. It's a good idea to use. The scroll isn't anything special. It's a scroll. It hasn't been ground. It's only turned. So a little cheap there. Here's the jaws that I fixed. You can see they move easily with one finger. And these are the outside jaws. Let's put them aside. Here's the set of inside jaws that I got with the chuck. And these I haven't modified in any way yet. They are as original as possible. So let me assemble the chuck. Oh, by the way, I just remembered that I didn't have to disassemble the chuck, but it was basically a good idea to show what is inside a chuck. So now it's operating again. These chuck jaws that came with the chuck are basically crap. There's some burn marks on the ground surfaces, mainly in the inside of the slot. It doesn't matter because it's not a surface that is in contact with anything, but these edges at the bottom of the slot, there's some extra material. It has not been ground straight to the bottom, or there is a round corner rounding from grinding. Basically the grinding wheel has worn out. And because this chuck has these T-slots that are extremely sharp cornered, they haven't been finished in any way. I don't know if I can show it. So yeah, sharp corners. And these jaws don't have any relief cuts in them. They're just ground not so good. So the problem with these is that they don't fit perfectly into the chuck. The start goes well. Sorry. This is the reason why I disassembled the chuck. I should really script these. So we have a number 1 jaw, number 1 slot. Push it in. Almost could push it all the way through. Number 2. This goes on well. The reason for this is because I have already modified this part. You can see that I got small relief grooves into the slots in that corner and that corner, and same on the other side. After the relief cut, I was able to use a very fine sharpening stone to go through the jaw slot to remove the extra material that was left still, and then I was able to check with the 7mm thick gauge block that the gauge block goes all the way into the slot and doesn't jam. It moves freely. You can see it goes all the way to the bottom. So if this goes to the bottom, then it means it, because this is this width between the slots is smaller than the width here. It should normally go in, but because of the poor grinding, it didn't fit. So with these little relief cuts, it fits perfectly with no binding at all. Here next is the number 3 jaw, and this is unmodified. This is without the reliefs cut into it, and this is the number 3 slot. It's already jamming. It goes, when it goes deeper and deeper, it binds more and more. And you can't notice this when using chuck key to operate the chuck, other than that the chuck is stiff to operate. It moves, but it requires force, and the force comes from this. This is basically a very large screw which provides leverage, and again this provides leverage in the form of gearing, and this provides more leverage in the form of lever. Well, duh. So let's assemble the chuck with these couple of jaws. To actually show how much force it needs. So without any jaws in place, this is easy to operate. So let's load the jaws in place. So, number 1. Number 2. And number 3. It all goes well up until this point, when the jaws are almost all in. You can't use only your finger much longer. You have to start grabbing the chuck key and actually turn and turn and turn, and it goes stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. and this is not how a chuck should operate. Not good at all. And it doesn't matter if you have lubrication or not, this same thing happens even with the stock lubrication or molybdenum sulfide grease, which is the manufacturer recommendation for chucks like this. So yeah, this is the problem that I found. There's also some other quality issues. For example, this T-slot edge here on the main face, it had burrs on it. You could actually, you can easily feel still a little burr on that edge. So now there's no burr. If you have a burr on this face, it's impossible to put your workpiece against the chuck face to provide a reference, for example when facing the length, or if you want to have a certain thickness part and you want to rest it on this face, as this face should be parallel with the spindle face. So that's a problem. The other problem was that these slots that guide the jaws, because these jaws are a hair under over 12 millimeters. I think it was 1201. Yeah, it's 1201. The same with the other jaws. Focus, yes. So these were originally so that they didn't move freely in the slot, which should guide them without any wiggling, and it was usually good on the outside, but when you got more towards the center it got tighter and tighter and tighter. And what I noticed that they also had burrs. I tested it with the 12 millimeter gauge block, and it moves freely without rocking. Except this one slot where it can rock, and this is not supposed to move sideways like this. I would say it's a 1/100th of a millimeter too wide, so not consistent. Here we can take here I have a 101 and 11, so 1201 together, and yeah, no rocking. So that's too wide. These surfaces were very poorly made. They are not ground, they are from milling, and had burrs on them, and basically this chuck has burrs on every surface. Nothing is finished. Sharp surfaces. I understand that this is a cheap chuck, but considering that this is 1.5 times the price of a Chinese chuck, I'm quite surprised that this is still the same quality as the Chinese chucks. They have the same issues, and the only reason I would pay for the premium price for this is that you can purchase soft jaws for this chuck, and these are actually very nice addition if you want to make something special. And these are a little, I suppose, because these will fit any chuck you want. These are not ground or made per chuck, but are general parts. So these are a hair under 12, the 1198 or 975, 97, a little bit where you want to measure it. It seems that there's some quality issues with the thickness also. So hair under there, hair under there, but nevertheless a little under 12. So that's probably because they want these to fit all their chucks that have been made, and these also are not ground properly. Mainly these will fit. These don't have such amount of corner rounding in the slots, so these operate quite nicely. If I remember correctly, I didn't have to modify even one jaw. Let's see. Number 2. And 3. Yeah, these work just perfectly. Again, no force required to operate the chuck. Just simple hand finger force. And this is how a chuck should operate. For those of you who want to make your own modifications to the chuck jaws, mainly these grooves, undercuts, these are hardened jaws. These are, at least the manufacturer says that these are 55 HRC. So what I did was use this is a kind of like a Dremel, but operates on compressed air. A pencil grinder or air grinder or die grinder, what you want to call it. And I used a small diamond impregnated ring, hard words, to cut the small relief groove at about 45-degree angle. So like that, and I did this to all the grooves. And last thing I did was to take 2 7mm gauge blocks, and what I did was I used the digital calipers, zero it out. I measured the slot width in here which is around 7 millimeters or so. I can now remember this reading. Take my chuck jaws and take my gauge blocks, put them side by side. This is the 7 millimeter thickness that I'm using to measure, but I measure the width of these, which is 1774. I hit 0. So now if I put them around one jaw until they bottom out, like so. This is the unmodified jaw. You can see that there's a huge gap of air. There should be some gap, but this is too much. Now I can measure over my gauge blocks, and you can see it's a hair over 8 millimeters wide. So this indicates that it will not fit in the slot because of the missing corner roundings or reliefs. And this is a good example of corner rounding. This gauge block tries to jam in the slot, so it doesn't move. It freely slides in the very beginning of the slot. It's very narrow point there. But if I put it deeper, it immediately binds and becomes stiff. So if I take the one with the reliefs on it and put the gauge blocks, you can hear it click. It moves very freely, indicating a 7 millimeter wide slot, and there's no air gap between these two parts, or there is a small gap but hardly noticeable. So if I put these around, now you can see they fit nicely, and if we measure, we get a little over 6 millimeters, which is almost 1 millimeter less than the width of the T-slot. So this indicates that this will fit into the chuck without binding, and that I already demonstrated that it fits and moves freely and doesn't rock in any way. So am I happy? Well, considering the price, this is a cheap chuck, mainly targeted for the hobby market, and I would say that this is worth the money with the small modifications. It's an okay chuck, very precise according to the inspection report. For a 3-jaw chuck, but if you don't need the soft jaws on this chuck, I would almost advise buying on the Chinese version if you want the cheap chuck, because it has the same issues and needs the same fixes to operate properly. But in my applications I need the soft jaws, so I pay the premium price for this, and I'm happy with that. The actual modification time to fix these jaws takes something like 30 minutes to an hour if you take a coffee break or drink beer. But it's just, this is a hobby for now, so I don't care. It's a very simple fix, and I informed Arc Aero Trade about this issue, and I hope that they can relate it to the factory, because the factory didn't answer me anything. I hope things get better over time. If not, just get a Dremel, get a sharpening stone, get gauge blocks. These are fairly cheap if you buy them one by one. So the whole set will cost you a few €100. And of course, if you want to go so anal about it, there's always lube. No, sorry. It's an engineer's blue or spotting blue or whatever you want to call it. Nicely stains all your clothes, your fingers and everything, and always use a little brush to apply. But yeah, that's the Zither chuck. I hope you enjoyed. This is my probably first long video I've done. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I said that already. So thank you for listening, and I hope to review a original Chinese 80mm chuck soon, because I'm about to order one in a week or two. Okay, thank you.